The rain fell sideways on Iron Station, slicking the titanium walkways and hissing against the forced domes above. It was always raining here, always gray. Always heavy. Ivy Marin stood at the center of the tribunal chamber, soaked despite the shields, hands bound in a shimmer of blue psychic cuffs. Her hair clung to her cheeks, and the once white robe she wore looked like a funerary wrap, stained at the hem with dirt from the walk across the plaza. 5 judges sat high above her in glass chairs that hovered with soft pulses. Their faces unreadable. Their robes stitched with the sigils of the old order: control, regulation, purity. Ivy Marin, spoke the lead magistrate, a tall, angular woman whose voice had no warmth. You are charged with the murder of Kieran Vale, heir of the Vale dynasty, and suspected coercion through empathic interference. How do you plead? Ivy did not answer. She hadn't spoken in 3 days. Not since her last cry shattered the lamps of her holding cell. She had loved Kieran. The room was silent. The audience behind the energy barriers, press, citizens, officials, shifted uncomfortably. Many of them had never seen a real empath before, only heard the stories. And Ivy looked nothing like the monster they expected. She looked like a girl who had broken and forgotten how to piece herself back together. The judge sighed. Very well. Silence will be taken as a non-contest. Proceed with evidence review. A holoscreen flickered to life. A montage of static-filled footage, Ivy entering Kieran's private estate. The lights inside the villa dimming. Bursts of psionic energy measured on the sensors. Ivy running out in the rain. Kieran found hours later, lifeless, eyes open, a trace of tears on his face. The crowd murmured. We have testimonies, the prosecutor added, from staff who claim Miss Marin had emotional instability. And records of her enrollment in psychic reconditioning which she abruptly abandoned. Clearly, this was a breakdown. Tragic, yes, but criminal. Ivy didn't flinch. But her knuckles were white beneath the cuffs. In the gallery, near the rear, a hooded figure shifted. Dark eyes fixed on her. He looked like a wanderer, soaked like her, silent. But he watched her like someone who knew her before this, before the accusations, before the silence. Leor Adar had returned to Iron. Ivy remembered the last night with Kieran like a melody trapped behind glass. They'd sat by the balcony of his home, overlooking the endless wetlands. The moonlight had made his silver eyes softer. He was born into wealth, into legacy. She, into silence. They should have never crossed paths. But they had. I can feel you pulling away, Ivy had whispered, her fingers pressed to his chest, over his heart. I'm scared, he admitted. Not of you. Of what you make me feel. He had kissed her like the world would end that night. And maybe it had. Because moments later, someone else had arrived. Someone from the Vale house. Ivy didn't remember his name, only the coldness in his eyes. He'd warned Kieran, told him his inheritance was in danger. That Ivy was not a woman, but a weapon. A liability. And Kieran, oh Kieran, had tried to defend her. She's not dangerous, he'd said. She's the only one who's ever seen me. There had been a flash of light. A psychic strike. Not hers. She had tried to shield him. Tried to take the blast herself. But she wasn't strong enough. And Kieran's last words had been a whisper in her mind, don't let them turn you into what they fear. Back in the tribunal, Ivy's vision blurred. The cuffs around her wrists hummed with pain any time her thoughts surged too brightly. They were designed to suppress emotion, but not to erase it. A new witness was called. Someone from the estate. Ivy barely listened. It didn't matter. The truth had been buried beneath politics and legacy the moment Kieran's body was found. They didn't want justice. They wanted closure. And they wanted her gone. The lead judge turned to her. You may speak, Miss Marin. If you wish to offer your version of events, now is the time. A beat. 2. Then 3. Ivy looked up. She opened her mouth. And nothing came out. Because if she spoke, if she truly opened her heart, it would unravel everything. Not just her own mind. But theirs too. So instead, she closed her eyes. And remembered. Ivy was born in the low sectors of Iran, to a line of broken sensitives. Her mother had died giving birth. Her father left before she learned to walk. She was raised in a communal creche where children with psychic abnormalities were taught to contain themselves, to smile softly, speak gently, and never feel too loud. But Ivy had always felt too much. The first time she touched another child and saw his pain, saw the bruises beneath his shirt, she cried for hours. They punished her for it. Years later, when Ivy met Leor Adar, they were both barely teenagers. He was quiet, but kind. He carried a small music player everywhere and let her listen when the nights were long. She hadn't understood the songs, but she liked how they felt. He had been the first person she ever kissed. Then, one day, he disappeared. She learned later that his family had moved off-world. He hadn't said goodbye. After that, Ivy built walls. She became careful. Precise. Until Kieran Vale walked into her life and tore them all down again with a single smile. The judge's voice cut through her thoughts. Miss Marin. Do you deny causing the death of Kieran Vale? Ivy looked up, eyes hollow. No, she whispered. The courtroom gasped. Even Leor, hidden in the crowd, felt the breath leave his lungs. But Ivy wasn't finished. I did not kill him, she said, voice shaking now, rising. But I was there. I failed to save him. And I will carry that until my last breath. Then who? Someone who wanted silence. Someone who feared what we were, her voice cracked. You don't want the truth. You want a villain. The psychic cuffs surged, but this time, Ivy didn't cry out. You want me gone because I remind you that emotion is power. That love can be louder than violence. That not everything can be contained. She looked directly at the judges now. And for the first time, they looked shaken. I loved him, Ivy said softly. And you killed that love the moment you decided I was the danger, not the lie that took him from me. Leor stood slowly. Unnoticed by most. His hands clenched. Something in Ivy's voice, her eyes, told him she was breaking. And he had broken too, once. When he left her. When he ran from what he felt. He would not run again. The tribunal called for recess. Ivy was escorted back to her cell beneath the courthouse. Rain still fell. And in the silence of her concrete room, Ivy curled into herself and whispered his name like a prayer. Kieran. Not knowing that far above her, someone had already begun pulling at the threads of the lie. Someone who had once loved her, quietly. And was ready to stand beside her again. The first time Leor Adar saw Ivy Marin cry, they were both 13 and hiding in the scaffolding of the old listening tower. She'd just been reprimanded by the wardens for touching a classmate's mind without permission. Even then, Leor had known it wasn't an accident. She had felt pain from someone and reached instinctively to comfort it. You're not wrong for feeling, he had told her that night. She hadn't believed him. Then again, he hadn't believed himself enough to stay. Now, 15 years later, Leor stood in the rain again. Iron Station hadn't changed, the skyline still pierced the sky with its jagged towers, and the smell of wet steel and synth oil still clung to every corridor. But Ivy had changed. Or maybe just the way he saw her. When he left, she was a girl with dreams too large for the world she lived in. Now, she was a woman being crushed by those same dreams, shackled and accused. He had read the tribunal transcripts on the long flight back. The trial stank of manipulation. Half the evidence was circumstantial. The other half was emotion twisted into fear. Ivy was an empath. She had touched the heart of someone powerful, and when that person died, no one wanted to believe it was anything but her fault. Because feelings like theirs weren't supposed to exist. Not between someone like Ivy Marin and a noble-born heir like Kieran Vale. Lior's fists clenched as he moved through the outer corridors of the court building. Rain dripped from his hood. He had forged a passcode, using old credentials from his days as a systems analyst on the outer moons. He knew he had hours at most before the security AI noticed his entry log didn't belong. But that was enough. He needed answers. Not just for Ivy, but for the part of him that had never stopped missing her. The evidence vault smelled like sterilized regret. Everything inside was tagged, sealed, stacked by date and relevance. Lior moved past rows of memory chips, data cores, and neuroimprints, until he reached the tray marked Case 931, Mar/Vale. A holocard rested atop the file stack. Handwritten, old school. Ivy's handwriting. He recognized the soft loops, the careful slant. He flipped it open. If I disappear, don't believe what they tell you. That was all. His breath caught in his throat. Beneath it, the official files. Sensor logs, energy readings, witness statements. The images he'd seen in the hearing, played for the audience to condemn her. But now he looked closer. Frame by frame. The energy spike in the villa that night, it hadn't matched Ivy's psionic signature. Hers was warmer, slower. He remembered how her emotions always moved like tides, gentle but inevitable. This blast, recorded at the exact moment of Kieran's collapse, was sharp, erratic. Rushed. Manufactured. His fingers danced over the screen, isolating the waveform. No way this belonged to an empath. This was synthetic. You always see what they hide, a voice said behind him. Lior spun. A figure leaned against the archway of the vault, a woman in a dark coat, her eyes sharp, her stance guarded. Hair braided tight over one shoulder. Nera Vale. Kieran's younger sister. He hadn't seen her since the funeral. Nera, he said cautiously. She stepped forward, but not closer. You're not supposed to be here. Neither are you, he replied. I came to see what the trial wouldn't show me. They stared at each other for a moment, two ghosts crossing paths in the ruins of someone they both loved. Then Nera said softly, she didn't kill him, did she? Lior exhaled. No. Nera's face didn't change, but something behind her eyes did. A small flicker. A loosening. They sat on the cold floor of the vault, surrounded by files and silence. I hated her at first, Nera admitted. Not because I believed she did it, but because he loved her more than he ever trusted me. Lior said nothing. He knew that kind of jealousy. He had lived it. The night before he died, she continued, he told me he was leaving the family estate. Going to start something new. With her. He said she made him feel free. And what did you say? I told him he was a fool. She looked down at her hands. I thought she was using him. Like everyone else. But now, she looked up at Lior, I feel her sometimes. Not just her pain. Her love. Like it's still echoing. Lior blinked. You're sensitive. Nera nodded slowly. Our family made me suppress it. Hid it for years. Said it was weakness. But ever since Kieran died, I see things. When I sleep. When I touch certain objects. She reached into her coat and pulled out a ring, Kieran's. I've seen that night, she said. But not how they describe it. I see a shadow. I see him shielding her. And I see her screaming. She looked at him. I think we were wrong about her. Lior felt something shift in his chest. Guilt. Relief. Something like hope. Then help me prove it, he said. Nera hesitated. I can't go back to my family, she whispered. If I take a side, I lose everything. So did she, Lior said. But she never stopped fighting. They broke into the lower tech archive that night, bypassing locks left untouched for years. The deeper they went, the older the systems became. Analog. Less traceable. Lior found a junction console and fed in the synthetic waveform. He ran a reverse lookup, checking for any matching pulse signatures. One match. Archived under an old military tech file. Classified. Nera swore. They used a Psi proxy, she said, stunned. They used a machine to fake an empathist strike. And pinned it on Ivy, Lior finished. The report was signed by a name neither of them expected. Judge Saren Noor, the very woman presiding over Ivy's trial. She was part of it, Nera whispered. This wasn't just a cover-up. This was a setup. Back in her cell, Ivy sat against the wall, listening to the sound of distant thunder. She had stopped hoping long ago. Not for freedom, but for belief. For someone, anyone, to see past the fear. She didn't know that two people who once left her were walking through storm and shadow to bring the truth back to light. In a run-down apartment on the edge of the city, Nera and Lior copied the evidence into two separate chips. One would go to Ivy's public defender. The other, they'd deliver directly to someone else. Someone who could testify with more than words. I know someone, Lior said. Someone they buried a long time ago. He saw it all before anyone else did. Who? Nera asked. Lior looked out the window. His name is Kale Divan. They called him a madman. A prophet. But he was right. About the order. About the Vale family. About the girl who would shake the stars. Where is he now? Lior's voice was quiet. Beneath the ice. Waiting. That night, Lior stood alone on the old balcony where Ivy once stood with Kieran. He stared into the wet dark. And he whispered. I'm sorry I left. The wind didn't answer. But somewhere in the shadows of Iron, Ivy stirred from sleep. And for the first time in weeks, she dreamed of music. Not noise. But memory. And maybe, just maybe, of someone coming back. The dreams began 2 nights after Nera Vale entered the vault. They came in flashes, unbidden, raw. Kieran standing at the balcony's edge, his fingers trailing Ivy's hair. Ivy's laugh, soft as rain. The brightness in his eyes, not joy, not pride, but something more dangerous. Freedom. Then came the shadow. And silence. Nera would wake gasping, hands shaking, Kieran's ring burning cold against her chest. For most of her life, she had been taught that dreams were nothing more than memory fragments, useless echoes. But these weren't echoes. These were messages. They pulled at her. And worse, each time she woke, she could feel Ivy's grief like it was her own. And the fear. Not just from the night Kieran died, but from childhood. From the wardens. From being called wrong, from being asked over and over again to be smaller, feel less, stay still. Nera had told herself for years that her own gifts were faint, buried. But the more she stood near the truth, the more they bloomed like a wound reopening. She hadn't spoken to her father in 2 months. Even before the trial, even before Ivy, something in her had started to twist away from the House of Vale. Maybe it had begun when Kieran died. Or maybe even before, when she saw how easily her family wore grief like a costume, not a truth. He was weak, her father had said that day. He let the empath in. And Nera had nodded. Quietly. Obediently. But a part of her had screamed inside. And now that scream had a voice. Ivy's. Lior paced across the quiet rooftop of the hideout they'd claimed above the old transport docks. Down below, patrol drones hovered, scanning the alleys. The city had grown more tense in the last few days. Someone knew they were looking. "We need to move soon," Leor muttered, scanning the skyline. "They'll track the vault breach any day now." Nera was seated at the edge of the building, legs dangling over the side like she didn't care if the sky swallowed her. "They already know," she said softly. "They just haven't decided how to silence us yet." "Kale's the key," Leor said. "We get him, we bring the truth. We clear Ivy." "And then what?" she asked, turning to him. "Do you think that changes everything? Doesn't it?" Nera shook her head. "Truth doesn't undo fear. It just exposes it." Leor walked to her side. "But maybe it sets the right people free." For a moment, they both looked out over the city. And something passed between them, not quite friendship, not yet trust. But something that carried the shape of understanding. Nera returned to her family estate under the cover of darkness. The old home stood like a wound against the hillside, ornate, sterile, cold. She entered through the east gate, past the gardens she once hid in as a child. The servants were fewer now. The Vale name still held power, but its reach had begun to wither after Kieran's death. It was Ivy's trial that kept the name relevant. A distraction. A weapon. She moved quickly, through the glass corridors, toward her brother's study. She hadn't been inside since the funeral. Everything was still preserved. His coat draped over the back of the chair. His old field journal open, mid-entry. The scent of that cologne he never wore in public but loved in private. Sandalwood and wind. Nera closed the door behind her and sat at the desk. She ran her fingers across the journal page. "I told Nera today. About Ivy. She didn't take it well. But I think she knows. I hope she does. There's no turning back. If anything happens to me." The ink trailed off. Nera swallowed. Behind the journal, hidden under a stack of old medical reports, she found a black data crystal, no larger than her thumb. No label. Her fingers trembled as she inserted it into the console. It blinked to life. Kieran's face appeared, grainy and flickering. "If you're seeing this, I'm probably gone." Nera froze. "You were right to mistrust Ivy. Not because she was dangerous, but because she reminded me what I wanted. And what this family fears most. Choice." He looked tired. Like he hadn't slept in days. "Father knows. I think he's planning something. The Order wants Ivy erased, cleanly. They want to say it was a reaction. A psychic collapse. But she's not unstable. She's extraordinary." A pause. "Nera. I know you think you're not like me. But you are. You always were. And if anyone can protect her now, it's you." The message ended. And Nera felt like the floor had vanished beneath her. He had trusted her. Even after everything. Even after she turned away. She left the estate without being seen. But someone had seen her. From a nearby alcove, a tall figure stepped into the rain and activated a comm line. "Subject Nera has retrieved the data crystal," he said. A pause. "Proceed." A distorted voice replied. "Wait. Let her bring it where it needs to go. And when the circle forms, then strike." In the hideout, Nera handed the crystal to Leor. He played the message again. His jaw clenched at Kieran's words. "We need Kale now," he said. Nera nodded. "You really think he's still alive?" she asked. "I don't think," Leor replied. "I know. They took an old dropship, rusted, slow, untraceable, and flew north. Beyond the cities. Beyond the weather towers. Into the glacial wastes. Leor guided them through a narrow canyon, snow whipping against the windows. "How do you know where to find him?" she asked over the roar. Leor pointed ahead. Because I buried him. The crash site was still there. A broken ship, half submerged in the ice. Twisted metal and crystal. From the outside, it looked abandoned. But the scanners blinked with faint biosigns. Nera held her breath as they entered the wreck. Inside, the temperature dropped sharply. But in the center of the main chamber, inside a containment field, a man floated in stasis, his body curled, eyes closed. Cale Diven. His skin was pale. His temples lined with neural circuits. Once, he had been a leader in the resistance. A psychic visionary. But after the war, they called him mad. Exiled him. Lior placed a hand on the control panel. Cale, he whispered. Wake up. The stasis field dimmed. The circuit's power down. Cale's eyes snapped open. And he breathed in the air of the world once more. Nera didn't know what she expected. Someone broken. Lost. Shattered. But Cale rose slowly, eyes gleaming not with madness, but with clarity. He looked at them. And then he said, "She's still alive." Nera blinked. Who? Ivy. His voice trembled. I saw her. In the dark. Through the cold. She's still burning. Can you help us? Lior asked. Cale didn't answer immediately. Then he reached out and touched Nera's forehead. And in a flash. She saw it all. The night of the murder. The synthetic psyblast. Kieran's shield. Ivy's scream. The council watching from behind a mirrored screen. Approving. Nera gasped and staggered backward. They planned it, she whispered. Cale nodded. They wanted her broken. That night, by the fire inside the wreckage, Nera sat between Lior and Cale, silent. She stared at the snow outside, but she wasn't seeing it. She was seeing her brother. And the girl he had loved. The girl she had feared. The girl she had nearly helped destroy. And now. The girl she would fight for. We'll bring it to the tribunal, Lior said. The message. The scan data. The witness. They'll try to block it, Cale warned. They've done it before. Then we go public, Nera said quietly. I'll stand on that floor. In front of everyone. Lior looked at her. Are you sure? She turned to him. For the first time, her voice didn't shake. I was raised to protect the name of Vale, she said. But my brother died protecting Ivy. And now, I will too. Far across the stars, in a silent cell below the heart of Iron Station, Ivy Marin lifted her head. Her chains didn't break. Not yet. But her heart. For the first time in weeks. Beat with the faintest whisper of belief. Someone was coming. And she wouldn't have to stand alone. The first time Cale Diven saw Ivy Marin, she was no more than 16 and barely holding her emotions in check. She had sat in the back row of the resistance hearing chamber, eyes wide, lips bloodless, her hands curled so tightly in her lap they trembled. Cale had been speaking about projection theory, how empathic connections weren't just feelings, but living threads. His colleagues had scoffed. But not Ivy. Ivy had listened like she understood. Afterward, she waited in the corridor, silent. She hadn't spoken, just nodded when he acknowledged her. Later, he would remember that moment and say, she didn't ask questions. She already knew the answers. Now, years later, Cale stood among the wreckage of the glacial ship where he had buried himself in psychic hibernation to escape the purge. He had not dreamed. He had not felt. He had simply waited. And now she was in danger again. And this time, he would not be silent. They broke camp at sunrise. Cale, still recovering, walked with the assistance of a repurposed steel staff. Nera and Lior flanked him through the snow-swept gorge, silent but watchful. The cold bit at their faces, but no one complained. "You're certain she's still alive?" Lior asked, his breath visible in the frost. Kale nodded. "I don't feel her pain anymore. Only her silence." "What does that mean?" "She's locking herself away. Not out of fear, but to protect you." Nera's brow furrowed. "From what?" Kale paused at the ridge, his breath slowing. "If the tribunal fails, if they sentence her, they'll do more than imprison her. They'll strip her." "Of what?" "Her empathy," he said quietly. "They'll sever her soul from the weave. She'll live, but she'll never feel again." Nera recoiled. "That's legal," Lior said bitterly. "Barely." Kale looked at both of them. "We don't have days. We have hours." Iron's outer districts were on alert. As the three of them passed through the lower docks in disguise, drones scanned crowds for fugitives. Wanted posters flickered in hollow pixels: Ivy Marin, Lior Adar, Nera Vale. They were outlaws now. "I never imagined this," Nera murmured as they ducked into an old tunnel near the mag rail line. "Turning against my house." "You're not turning," Lior said. "You're choosing." Kale said nothing. He was concentrating, reaching out with his mind, trying to find Ivy in the weave. It was difficult. Her presence flickered like a failing star. Then suddenly, he felt her. A whisper. A thread. Pain. Not sharp, but deep. And beneath it, surrender. "She's fading," he said. "They've moved up the sentencing." Lior cursed. "We won't make it to the court in time." "Then we don't go to the court," Kale said. "We go to the heart." Nera blinked. "You don't mean?" Kale turned to her, eyes fierce. "Yes. We're going to breach the Order's vault. We're going to show the world the truth." The Order's vault was buried below the magistrate hall, 6 layers beneath the public archives, behind a psionic firewall known only to a few. It was said that once you entered it, your mind was never quite the same. Kale had been there once. They hadn't known he survived. Now he would return. They used the tunnels from the old war, paths the resistance had mapped and forgotten. The ground trembled as the city above them moved in preparation for Tribunal Day. Ivy's sentencing was scheduled for noon. It was 10:37. As they approached the final corridor, Kale stopped. "Listen." Nera frowned. "I don't hear anything." "Exactly. The silence was wrong." Lior drew his old sidearm. "Trap." Kale nodded once. "But we have no time to wait." They moved. The first line of defense came as expected, automated sentries disguised as lighting fixtures. Lior took the first 2 with precision shots. Nera used her rising psychic strength to deflect a stun blast aimed at Kale. But it was when they reached the inner vault that they saw him. Magistrate Thorn. Older than the others. Colder. One of the architects of the tribunal, and Kieran's godfather. "You should not be here," he said. "Turn back, and I may forget I saw you." "We know the truth," Nera said. "We have the data. The logs. The recordings. Your signature." Thorn raised a brow. "Do you really believe anyone will listen to you over me?" "I believe in her," she said. And before he could fire, she reached into his mind and pushed. He gasped and staggered. Kale stepped forward, touching the vault wall. It shimmered. "Give me 5 seconds," he murmured. Lior watched the hallway. "You have 3. Kale's fingers glowed with psychic light. "Ivy," he whispered, "come back to me. Just for a moment." The wall opened. And the vault, bright, humming with forbidden tech and memory archives, stood exposed. Inside, they found what they needed. Not just records of the synthetic Psyblast. But orders. Signed by Judge Saren Noor. And a voice recording. Ensure the empath is present. Make it appear accidental. We need to end this cleanly. Let the heir be the martyr. She will be the blade. Nera's hands shook. They wanted them both gone, she whispered. They didn't just fear Ivy. They feared what they were together. Kale nodded grimly. Because love like that cannot be controlled. They didn't take the mag rails. They broadcasted. Nera uploaded the recording. Leor attached it to every public stream, every open comm line. The entire district lit up with the truth. Holoscreens played the voice of the judge. The crowd outside the court turned. The magistrates panicked. And deep in the court's lowest cell, Ivy heard the truth. And something inside her stirred. They're forcing the sentence, Kale said, reading the intercept. They're initiating psychic nullification. Leor didn't hesitate. We go now. They ran through the crowd, people parting as the fugitives passed. Some shouted in support. Others watched in awe. Nera reached the court doors first, and slammed her hand against the scanner. Nera Vale, the guard stammered, you can't be. Open the gate, she said. Unless you want the world to see your name next. The doors opened. Inside, Ivy knelt in the center of a suppression circle, her wrists bound in silver coils. Her hair fell over her eyes. Her skin looked pale, almost translucent. Her eyes were half shut. Kale entered first. And she looked up. When she saw him, she didn't speak. But her mind screamed. You came. Kale knelt beside her. I never left. Nera moved next, pressing the crystal into the judge's hand. Play it, she ordered. The judge hesitated. Leor raised his weapon. The audio began. The courtroom fell silent. And Ivy, shaking, rose slowly to her feet as the coil bindings fell away. No one moved. No one breathed. And then she looked to the judges. You took everything from me, she said softly. But you could not take this. She turned. And reached for Leor. He crossed the space in 2 steps, and held her. Really held her. For the first time since that night. Her body shuddered. Her mind quieted. Her hands trembled in his. And Leor said nothing. He didn't have to. His arms said what words never could. You are not alone. The verdict was reversed. The judges removed. The tribunal dismantled. And Ivy Marin, once chained for what she felt, walked out of the court with the people behind her. Not afraid of her. But following her. Kale watched from the shadows, his role fulfilled. Nera stood beside her. Not behind. Not above. But beside. And Leor? He never let go of her hand. Because some promises are made in silence. But held in the heart.